time moving on, I do request your indulgence, and we move now to the valedictory statement of the Honourable George Hawkins. The Honourable George Hawkins.
Mr. Speaker, I want to pay my respect to the family, friends and the comrades in the SAS on their sad loss of Lance Corporal Leon Smith. Mr. Speaker, today is a remarkable day for me. Today I've listened to the valedictory speech of one of my constituents, Ashraf Chowdhury. I've also listened to the person who held the seat of Manurewa immediately before me some 21 years ago, the Honourable Sir Roger Douglas. That we both give our valedictories on the same day is quite remarkable. But that's not all. There's more. My wife Jan is having her 65th birthday today. Happy birthday, Jan. But that's not all. My dear old mum had her 65th birthday on the day I was selected for the seat of Manurewa on the 12th of February 1990. That makes her one of my oldest supporters. I'm also pleased that my two brothers, Donald and David, and their wives are also present. David was involved in politics, having been on the Auckland Regional Council, and followed me as Mayor of Papakura. Maybe Donald had the most sense, he kept out of it. As a youngster, I was politically active. When I was 7 or 8, I put fresh dog droppings in the letterbox of our local national MP. Perhaps great training for this place. Leaving Parliament, I look forward to my retirement. However, before I get into that, I should go back and say that I came from a very political family. My father, another George, was an expert in politics who told us that every politician is a mug. And that's perhaps the reason that my two brothers, David and Donald, and I all vote for 3 different parties. I've had 12 electoral victories. The first as a councillor on the Papakura City Council, then 3 terms as mayor. I've been elected to this parliament 7 times, and I'm fairly stupid. I've put my name forward and got elected to the Manurewa local board. There's no stopping some of us. I'm a baby boomer. I was born exactly 9 months after the end of World War II. My parents knew how to celebrate victory. When I went to Mount Albert Grammar, there was military training. We had an armoury full of World War I 303 rifles and a shooting range. Little wonder I protested against the Vietnam War and was involved in the anti-nuclear protests. After leaving school, I worked for the Auckland Star as a photographer, and I want to acknowledge Fred Freeman and Harold Payton for the help and guidance they gave me. I also went to Teachers College. They were great days, and that's where I met Jan. There was no electronic meeting places, no Facebook or Twittering, although there was plenty of that good old-fashioned romance. Jan and I taught at various schools in Auckland and Hawke's Bay. The first time I stood for the Papakura Council was way back in 1974. I stood with Jeff Braybrook, and Jeff isn't very well at the moment, and many people here will know Jeff. He wanted to be here. Hope you get to feel a bit better, mate. We both failed. In fact, we got a real thrashing. I tried again in 1977 with another equally dismal result. I also tried a 3rd time in a by-election, and once again I lost. By the time of the 1980 council election, I managed to scrape in as the lowest polling successful candidate. It was a great learning experience. In 1983, election, I became Mayor of Papakura with all my team elected to council. My wife Jan was marvellous mayoress and very popular. My deputy mayor, Nancy Hawkins, was very loyal and served on the council for many years. She was awarded the QSM and I think she thoroughly deserved it. Graham Tagg was the town clerk, who was a clever and wise advisor. Tragedy hit my family in 1989 when our youngest son, Cameron, died. Our lives were ripped to pieces. It was difficult to carry on our public roles. However, with the strong support of friends and the people of South Auckland, we managed. Our oldest son, George, was also a great help to us. Young George is married to Olga and has a wonderful and caring family. Jen and I are very proud of him. I had a stroke in 1991, followed by deep vein thrombosis. More recently, I survived bowel cancer. And I must say how glad I am that doctors and surgeons didn't take too much interest in politics. When I first came to Parliament in 1990, I was elected under the first past the post scheme. It appeared to me to be an admirable scheme. Then, in 1996, along came MMP. It took ages for a government to be formed, a bit of tail wagging by the dog. But there is a feature about MMP I strongly dislike. It is simply this: a candidate can stand for election in a constituency, lose the vote, could even finish third or fourth, and still be elected to Parliament on the party list. The each-way bet in elections should go. It is, at the moment, unfair to voters. They have rejected some candidates only to see their vote diluted and that the party has more say. The individual party bosses have more say than the individual voter. They place someone high on the list because he or she has the ability to get large donations or can help the numbers of a particular faction. In some cases, these defeated candidates enter Parliament on the list and then open an office at the taxpayer's expense in the electorate in which they were defeated. No wonder some politicians aren't held in high regard. People should think very carefully about this at this year's referendum. Candidates should be allowed to stand for a constituency or a list candidate, not both. I acknowledge that there are people in this House who are beneficiaries of the present MMP system and they will strongly disagree, but I believe the views of the public should be paramount. Another area I feel Parliament, perhaps I should say successive governments have failed to properly address is the way new babies and their mothers are treated. I know cases where a mother and baby are booted out of the hospital within 2 hours after the birth and sent to make their own way to a birthing centre for 1 or 2 days. Most are sent home before the mother's milk has come in. I think we're really failing the mothers and the next generation. Hopefully future governments will address the way hospital services treat mothers and their babies. I want to say the Parliament that I entered in 1990 was very different than the Parliament I leave. There were only 29 Labour MPs and we had to work together, even talk to each other, although not everyone listened to each other. Mike Moore was our leader. He was very tough. He was a slave driver. He gave people an outstanding role model. He is a very caring and compassionate New Zealander. I'm very pleased when he became head of the World Trade Organisation and I was also delighted that the national government appointed Mike as New Zealand ambassador to the United States, a real and genuine friend. Back in the time I was first in Parliament, there were people like David Longy, Rob Muldoon and Richard Prebble, and I must say how delighted I was to hear some stories about them, and you'll be delighted that I'm not going to give them more publicity. However, debates were often very heated. The reading of speeches was not allowed, and speeches were a great deal longer. The Grand Hall was then quite different. It housed 6 snooker tables, comfortable leather armchairs. There was plenty of blue smoke and a number of equally blue jokes. It was, in fact, a gentleman's club. How things have changed. We've had women prime ministers, women governors general, a woman chief judge. Gone are the days of the typewriter. Parliament is filled with computers, laptops, cell phones, iPhones, iPads, and some MPs read their speeches often directly. Jonathan Hunt, and I'm glad he's here today, was the chief opposition whip, and there's no problem for an MP that he hadn't seen before, or one that a chat and a quick gin tea or a little wine wouldn't cure. He fully deserved the title of Father of the House. I was lucky to serve in 2 of Helen Clark's cabinets. I want to place on record my sincere thanks to her. She was a great Labour leader. I also want to take the time to mention my gratitude to Michael Cullen for his guidance. I enjoyed my time in Cabinet, well, most of it. I had a number of interesting portfolios. There were internal affairs, ethnic affairs, veterans affairs, police and civil defence. I really enjoyed being New Zealand's first ethnic affairs minister, and the work that I did in that area, especially the government's apology to the Chinese for the way they had treated them so many years ago, and I got a huge amount of pleasure out of that. Taking the 2002 civil defence legislation through the House gives me a degree of personal satisfaction when seeing it in action in Christchurch. Those dark days in Canterbury will never be forgotten, and I hope it never becomes a political slamming match. The introduction of the police highway and the drop in road deaths was important. Working with voluntary sector, especially the volunteer firefighters, was a privilege and most enjoyable. I also loved to work in my electorate, especially the schools. I now come to the stage when I want to thank people who have helped me on my political journey. To my wife and my wider family, thank you. Thanks to Vicky, Bill, Murray, Daniel and Ian for running New Zealand's busiest electorate office. To Terry, who's just come back from having hip replacement. It's good to see you here today. And the late Beryl Booth, I extend my gratitude for the work they did for me and the people of Manurewa and for running my parliamentary office. Teresa McMahon, Melissa Turner were towers of strength as senior private secretaries. Secretaries in my ministerial office. Selwyn Manning had the unenviable task of looking after my media. The office had real smart people, like Daniel Newman, who's gone on to represent some of New Zealand's largest commercial property owners and is a person who's speaking a great deal of common sense in Auckland government. I hope he arrives at this place sometime soon. Mark Oldershaw went on from my office to become General Manager of the National Party. And a person who I really admire is Jerry Kineen. Many people will know. He worked as my police advisor, a wonderful, wonderful person. Thanks, Jerry. I was also very lucky to work with Jackie Couchman. She always gave me good advice and is a person of the highest integrity. Jackie is one of the country's outstanding career civil servants. I want to thank Bruce Conn, who helped me and many people in this building, ministers and members, for over 40 years. I also want to thank the people of Manurewa, giving me such an honour of being their elected Member of Parliament for the last 21 years. In particular, I want to thank those people who work for me locally, especially Faye, Trevor, Tom, June, Raj and the Fandy family, and all the other people who gave up their time so freely. I should also make mention of the late Fred Anderson, who was a very loyal friend. My thanks to everyone who has helped me over the years, the staff of Parliament, especially the messengers, security, the staff of the library and various speakers and their staff, the staff of the clerk's office and Bellamy's. I also made a promise to my opponent from the North Shore who stood against me, Cam Corder. I promised I'd give him a plug in my valedictory speech. And here it is. You come again after. Can I wish all those making valedictories all the best for their lives outside Parliament, and for those who wake up on the 27th of November and wish they'd made a valedictory speech, good luck anyway. And I want to say farewell to a person who's leaving this place without a valedictory, Rodney Hyde. Rodney, you were very courageous in reorganising Auckland, and it actually worked from day one, a legacy that Don Brash can't take away from you. Now, I was going to say something about grass, Don, but I see you sitting over there, so this is a smoke-free area, so I won't go into that. I also wish Phil Goff, Annette King and the Labour team they lead all the best for the general election in the years ahead. I wish Clayton Cosgrove, Shane Jones and my South Auckland colleagues Ross Robinson, Ashraf Chowdhury, William C.O. well, and Louisa Wall. Look after the people of Manurewa, Louisa, and they will look after you. Good luck. And thank you. Goodbye.
Order. Honourable members, before I adjourn the House, I should put on the record the first reading of the Victims of Crime Reform Bill is set down for resumption next sitting day. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. Tuesday, 4 October.